Hello kids, this is Mr. Whistler with your video lesson of the day, and today we are going to be talking about the Constitutional Convention, specifically the Virginia and New Jersey plans. Our first vocab word of the day is proportional, comparative relationship or corresponding to. Ways things are related. Now if you look down here, here is the proportion. The big dog gets the big food, and the little cat gets the little food. You don't get the same amount. If you're bigger, you get more.
If you're bigger, you get more.
Now this picture is out of proportion. There's no way the cat is as big as the whole building. If this was in the proper proportion, you probably wouldn't even see the cat. I'm out of proportion. Compromise. An agreement between two or more sides in which each side gives up some of what they want. Making a deal where each person gives something up. The Great Compromise and the 3/5 Compromise helped us to create our Constitution. Fair. The New Jersey plan allows the few to control the many. We will never allow that. If that's your attitude, then New York State is ready to leave this convention. And so will Maryland and Delaware. Now, Shays' Rebellion scared a lot of Americans. You had guys with guns taking over towns, and that's scary. Imagine if somebody came to Carson City with guns and were pointing them at us and forcing us to do things. We'd be scared. So it's understandable why the citizens were scared. So leaders knew something had to be done to fix the country's problems. Some thought a strong national or federal government was the solution. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton were two people leading the movement for change. Now these two individuals believed in a strong central government. So they were called Federalists. People who believed in a strong central government were Federalists. Now the people who did not believe in a strong central government and believed in a weak central government were called Anti-Federalists. Now Federalists, believing in a strong central government, believed in a weaker state government. And Anti-Federalists, who believed in a weak central government, believed in strong state governments. So Federalists believed in strong central government, and Anti-Federalists believed in weak central government. In 1786, Hamilton proposed a convention in Philadelphia. At this convention, he suggested that we should consider possible changes that were needed to make the Articles of Confederation stronger. Well, there were a lot of people that were kind of uninterested about this convention, George Washington being one of them. Now, Washington was very well respected and loved by the people. He was the one who struck the first blow against the French, and he was the leader who won us our independence. So the people loved him and trusted him. When I think about George Washington, I kind of think of our Pride model at CMS. Specifically, integrity. George Washington, to me, was somebody who tried to do the right thing even when nobody was looking. So people trusted him, and when George Washington said he wasn't that excited about it, other people kind of followed in his path. If George is not going, I'm not going. Well, after Shays' rebellion, Washington changed his mind, and he thought something needed to be done. Hey, did you hear George is going?
Oh, well, if George is going, I'm going.
And that's kind of how it was. People kind of looked up to Washington and followed his lead. So, after Washington agreed to attend, the convention took on a greater significance. At the convention in May 1787 in Philadelphia, 55 delegates or representatives met to discuss possible changes to the Articles of Confederation. Now, what was interesting about these delegates or representatives from all the states was that half of them had college degrees. Now, this was at a time when only one white man in 1,000 went to college. So it tells us that some of the smartest people in the country attended the Constitutional Convention. Several emerged as leaders. George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, James Madison and Edmund Randolph. Now, all these guys right here believed in a strong federal government, so they were called Federalists. Washington was a Federalist, even though he didn't admit it. Madison was a Federalist, Randolph was a Federalist, and Franklin was a Federalist. Now, James Madison is considered the father of the Constitution because he was the author of the basic plan of government that the convention adopted. A few months before the convention, Madison had gone to the library and done a lot of research. He researched governments from all over the world in all different time periods. And after he did all his research, he came up with a plan that he wanted to present at the convention. He kind of kept it a secret because nobody really knew about it. Well, when the convention started, George Washington was unanimously chosen to lead the meetings. Everybody trusted Washington, they respected him, and so he was the obvious choice to be their leader. Before they started, they established some rules. The first one being each state would only have one vote on all questions. Now remember, there were 55 delegates there, so each state had 4 or 5 guys there to represent them. But when it came to voting, they only had one vote. So they probably discussed the issues among themselves and then made a decision. And they only had one vote. Also, you got to remember that this Constitutional Convention lasted almost a year. And it was rare for all 13 states to be represented all the time. They couldn't stay there the whole time. They had to get back to their farms and their homes and their home states and report back and get information and bring it back. So a majority vote of the states present would make the decisions. And they did have a minimum rule. There had to be at least 7 states represented for them to make any decisions. So if there were only 6 states there, then they had to wait for more representatives to come so 7 states would be represented. The last rule that they had was the meeting was going to be closed to the public. These individuals who were here, these representatives, wanted to be able to speak freely. They didn't want to watch what they were saying in front of citizens. They wanted to do a good job and they wanted to say it how they needed to say it. So the meeting was closed to the public. After the rules were adopted, the convention opened with a huge surprise, and it came from the delegation from Virginia. Now Madison, if you'll remember, had done a lot of research and come up with a plan of government. Well, when they walked in, he asked Washington if they could speak first, and Washington gave him the floor. And basically what they said was the Articles of Confederation are so messed up, it would be better just to get rid of them and start over and try to create a strong new government. Well, so now that was the first question that they had to answer. What were they going to do? Were they going to try to revise the Articles, or were they going to throw them out and create a whole new government? Well, Madison's plan was called the Virginia Plan, probably because he was from Virginia. I can just see how they named it. They were on their way to the convention, he and several other delegates, and they're like, yeah, you have this plan, James, but what are you going to call it? Well, we come from Virginia, so why don't we call it the Virginia Plan? Yeah, that sounds good. Probably what happened. Well, here's the Virginia Plan. Now, if you look at this diagram, you see that it is a two-house legislature. One house is called the lower house, and the other house is called the upper house. Now, in our modern-day government, we have a two-house legislature. One house is called the Senate, and the other house is called the House of Representatives. So you can see we copied some things from this model. In this model, they had a court system. In our modern government, we have a court system, and the top court is the Supreme Court. In this model, they have a president. Well, in our modern government, we have a president. So the basic structure of our government is right here. The three branches are here. The legislative branch with both houses, the executive branch with the president, and the judicial branch with the court system. So all those were designed into the Virginia Plan. Now, where the Virginia Plan differs from ours is the way it ran. For instance, the lower house had to be elected first. They were elected by the people. That's the same way it is today. But where it differs is, after the lower house was established, they elected the upper house. And then when the upper house and the lower house were both established, then they, Congress together, elected the president. Now today, the people elect the Senate, the people elect the House of Representatives, and the people elect the president. So that was one of the differences that they changed. Now the big deal was membership. Under the Virginia Plan, the number of representatives each state got in each house was based on state population. For instance, Virginia was a big state with a big population. So they probably needed 10 representatives to represent their entire state, where Rhode Island was the smallest state and one representative could probably handle that state. Well, the small states did not like this because they didn't have as many representatives. And really, representatives comes down to voting, because in Congress, those guys try to pass laws and they discuss it, but when it comes right down to it, towards the end, they end up voting. So if there was an issue or a law to be passed that benefited Virginia and didn't benefit Rhode Island, well, Rhode Island was going to lose because they only had one vote and Virginia had 10. So the small states did not like the Virginia Plan because of the representation issue. So let's review what we just talked about. The plan called for a two-house legislature, a chief executive, and a court system. The members of the lower house would be elected by the people, and the members of the upper house would be elected by the members of the lower house. In both houses, the number of representatives in each house would be proportional to the state's population. This plan benefited the bigger states like Virginia because they would have more representatives than the smaller states like Delaware, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Representatives from the smaller states were against the Virginia plan. They wanted a plan where all the states were represented equally. Well, the bigger states didn't like that because if you'll remember, under the Articles, they tried to amend the Articles and allow it to tax. But under the Articles, if you were going to change them, all 13 states had to ratify it. Well, when they did that amendment to tax, only 12 ratified it, and Rhode Island did not. So in that case, Rhode Island, the small, was ruling the large, or the few were ruling the many. So that's why Madison set this up. So both houses' representation was based on state population. So the many would rule the few. Well, after they introduced the Virginia plan, the New Jersey delegates left, and they were out for a while, and they decided to create their own plan. So they created their plan, and when they were walking back over to the meeting, they said, "Well, we have our own plan. What are we going to call it?" Well, the guys from Virginia called theirs the Virginia plan, so let's call ours the New Jersey plan. Yeah, that sounds good. So representatives from New Jersey presented an alternative plan that fixed the Articles of Confederation, which was what they thought the convention was empowered to do. So they didn't think they had the authority to throw the Articles of Confederation out and create a whole new constitution, and that's what they said. So they said under their plan you were going to have a one-house legislature like it was in the Articles of Confederation, where each state would have one representative. So this was represented. This representation was based on equality, and they added in the right to tax and the right to regulate trade. So these were the new powers. And they added in an executive branch that was weak. It would consist of more than one person. So if these guys had to make a decision, then these 5 guys would have to vote on it. So basically, it was still the Articles of Confederation with a couple more powers. Still kind of a weak government. So to review, the New Jersey plan kept the Confederation's one-house legislature with 1 vote for each state. Congress would have the new powers to set taxes and regulate trade. Congress would elect a weak executive branch consisting of more than one person. The small states loved the New Jersey plan because all the states had equal representation in Congress. So the representatives had to decide what to do. Fix the Articles or write a new constitution and create a new government. They decided to work towards creating a new central government based on the Virginia plan. They decided to scrap the Articles of Confederation, but they had to resolve the issue of representation between the large and small states. And other issues, how were the members of Congress going to be elected? Were slaves going to be counted as part of the population on which representation would be based? And they had to solve the issue of slavery itself. In the Declaration of Independence, it says all men are created equal, yet half of our country has slaves. Well, that's it for the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan. Next time we'll talk about the compromises and how they created the Constitution. So go ahead and finish your note taker, which is here, and we will complete your evidence questions tomorrow. Thanks, kids, and have a great day.